The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are our own, or those of our guests, and in no way represent the views of the companies, associations, or organizations that any of us may work for or represent. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they were told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident. You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast that explores the many pathways to an aviation profession, the challenges that a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, a professional airline pilot currently flying for a U.S. legacy airline with close to 20 years on the flight line. This is Flight 86 of the Squawk Ident Podcast, recorded on the 7th of August, 2021, from the Aviator Sound Studios from somewhere in Southern California. On today's flight, we have the privilege of speaking with an aviator that has a strong foothold in his career progression, where he is getting ready for a qualified upgrade on the Embraer 145. He will share his journey in aviation with us, and we will explore his take on the pandemonium that has flooded our industry over the past few weeks. All this and more aboard Flight 86 of the Squawk Ident Podcast. Now that our pre-flight is complete, let's get ready to push off the gate and start those virtual podcast engines. Assisting at the controls today is a superb aviator and Squawk Ident co-host. He is a former international professional racquetball champion, a member of the 9G Club, an A&P in avionics tech, an RC aircraft commander, a boat skipper, a commercial drone operator, and currently an Airbus pilot for Legacy Airlines. The name we use here on the show is an alias to our employer, a U.S. mainline carrier. He joins us today fresh off two chaotic trips out of DFW. First, his successful IOE, and then a quick Austin trip that turned into a long Austin trip. From his man cave in Flower Mound, Texas, please help us in welcoming our very own Rob D. Rob, how the heck are you?
I'm doing well, Tony. How you doing, man? It's good to be back.
I'm doing pretty good, man. It's been crazy this past couple of weeks. I mean,
tell me about it.
It's like people have lost their minds.
It sure has, man. And it's definitely one for the record books. Who would have thought, all these delays and cancellations that we're experiencing would be something that you'd have after a huge pandemic. It's just, you figured it'd be the other way around, where you'd be able to string together a good operation and recoup all the lost profits and just have a smooth running machine and head off into the sunset with a good operation. But it's been crazy, man. It's been hard for us to just put together a couple of good days in a row.
Yeah. And it's not just over at Legacy or over at some of the other low cost carriers that are out there. This is really affecting every 121 operator, at least here in the U.S. We're not ready. We've been talking about this rubber band effect for over a year now. We were anticipating this. And it seems like, and I'm not the expert in aviation business, especially at a multi-billion-dollar international airline, but it seems like management is being, for a lack of a better term, reactive instead of being proactive. And there's been a lot of debate, especially out on the flight deck when you're cruising along at 37,000 feet, about, why weren't they better prepared? If they didn't furlough any pilots or flight attendants, maybe everybody would have stayed current and we could have sprung back. But it's not that simple. It's not just them. It's everything. From below wing services to above wing services. I mean,
contracted services.
It's honestly, I think that's part of the problem.
That's what it is. It really is. Because, you figure, when we had that drawback in our operation last, March or so, and that lasted for 8 to 10 months or so. All the contracted services that, all the airlines use, they obviously didn't need the work. They didn't need to work. Let me rephrase that. They didn't have the work because the airlines weren't running their full schedule anymore. So they had to cut costs themselves. So they had to lay off people. And now that we have, ramped up our operation and relatively quickly, these contract carriers, who most of them you can imagine, their pay scale, let's be honest, isn't the best. A lot of these are very low paying wages, and a lot of these people. I mean, I'm not saying every job is, but a lot of the times the government pays more than what these contract carriers or contract services would
Yeah.
provide. So they're having a hard time finding people to come back to work, and because of that, there's a lot of services that are just not available to us like we used to have, and fuelers, the food trucks,
Yeah.
people pushing people around in wheelchairs, even just at our own company, below the wing, the rampers, the gate agents. I mean, they're everybody's working their butt off, and believe me, the people that are there, they are doing their best to prevent this from happening. They are working their butts off. A lot of us are working overtime, working 2 or 3 shifts just to make it happen. But they're giving it their all. But it's just a culmination of weather, of short staffing, of the company overloading the operation with flights. It's just
Yeah.
it's chaos.
In a perfect world, this dynamic staffing would work because you would minimize your staffing when the time is slow and then maximize your staffing when you're known to historically be busy. But we're in a whole new world here. And
Sure.
there's no way to know what our trend was last year and compared to this year and staff dynamically. We have to staff on the ready. And unfortunately, it's creating chaos throughout the system. And then
Yeah.
you can spin it however you want. You can blame holes on the runway due to lightning strikes.
Yeah.
But the truth is,
Totally out of your control.
it's and we might get to why 18 right was closed for a while the other day. Yes, I got caught up in that. But today I am very, very excited. For a while now, I've been talking with our next guest and trying to get him on the show, and it finally our schedules have worked out. And
Cool.
life, being an airline pilot, that's sometimes a big challenge, especially when priorities come to family. And our next guest is definitely a family man. I mean, I hear about his adventures and I'm like, can I just come over and hang out with you and your kids? And as we mentioned in the opener, today's guest is a brave father of 4, an enduro warrior, an angler, a mechanic, a snowboarder, a cargo pilot, a flight instructor, a ferry pilot, a jumper dumper, a cargo pilot as well. And he has type ratings in the King Air 350 and the Embraer 145. He is now in the process of getting ready to go through what's called a qualified upgrade over at Sandpiper on the Embraer 145. Please help us in welcoming to the show for the first time, Mr. Pete Tenderenda. Pete, how you doing?
Hey, good morning, Tony. How are you? How's it going, Rob?
Doing great.
Doing good, Pete. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me. This is pretty neat. It's that introduction. I hope I live up to it. It sounds really, really cool. I kind of want to meet that guy.
Yeah.
It's all been a blur. It's just a daily blur. But I'm doing all right.
Good. I'm so happy to hear it, and I'm so happy to have you on the show. Thank you so much for coming on and agreeing to be with us. It's very interesting. We first met over at Sandpiper at the very beginning of your career. Do you remember that experience?
Yeah, I do. I think we met in Dallas, didn't we? And I think that was our first flight. That was my first IOE flight. They were flying me down to Dallas, I believe, and I was supposed to meet some guy, and I don't know where I was supposed to meet him or where I was supposed to go, but I think I met you at the Starbucks down in Terminal, I don't know, wherever Sandpiper flies.
Where else would you meet Tony?
Yeah, getting some good coffee, right? But that was my first, I believe that was my first IOE trip. It was with you. It was out of Dallas, and our first leg was maybe Dallas to, where was it? Birmingham. And then Birmingham to Miami, I believe. And then we had a unscheduled overnight in Miami. And then I think you called a friend, and we went out got some good Colombian food. It was pretty late at night. And I'm surprised this guy came out and picked us up, but it was probably about midnight or so.
We went to the original La Carreta.
We did, right? Yeah.
Oh,
And
that's a good
then,
place.
yeah, and this was my first Iowa experience with you, and it was really fun. And you made it really fun. You were very professional, very knowledgeable, and I was like, wow, this is a really cool introduction to my airline career.
Yeah, and just as a side note, that friend that was very gracious to meet us in Miami uh, is now the chief pilot for the Sandpiper in Miami. I gave
Is
him
he?
his
No
IOE,
kidding.
I think maybe a few weeks before I gave you yours. And I met him, and he is a
Really?
really interesting character. He owned a flight school there for many years and ended up selling the flight school after a while. But he said, "Hey, I'm teaching people how to fly to have a career in an airline. I might as well go after that myself." And so he did the time and got a job at Sandpiper, and I gave him IOE, and we hit it off. And he said, "Hey, if you're ever in Miami, let me know. I'll take you out for some good Cuban food." And about a couple weeks later, you and I were stuck in Miami on a layover, unscheduled stop, and he's like, "Yeah, I'll come pick you up." And what do you know?
It was pretty late. I remember we were waiting a while for a van, and it was probably midnight. I was just in a blur. I was still back in Chicago trying to board my first deadhead, and I already completed a couple flights, and now we're sitting in Miami. I'm sweating. It's hot. I'm in this monkey suit I'm not used to wearing.
Yeah.
And it was a good time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
the
was just so
hotel,
surprised that he came out.
yeah, the hotel
Sorry,
was
go ahead.
like, we don't have any rooms for you. It's like, well, this is the hotel that's scheduled. And yeah, they were a newly remodeled hotel by the airport. I remember that was a fiasco, man. It was a fiasco.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm just so surprised he came out and picked us up, and it was probably 1 a.m. and we're eating good Cuban food.
Yep. Having some
Nice.
presidentes and having
Yeah.
some plantains, and oh my God, that was
Yeah.
fun. So yeah, wow, flashback, man. I
Yeah.
hadn't thought of that in a while, but thank you for bringing that one back to the forefront of my mind. That was a good time. And I believe we went for a run too,
We
didn't we,
did,
on
yeah.
South Beach?
I think he dragged me. I think I ran 4 miles that day. I think I got shin splints, and you're just kind of going along.
I'm running backwards. I'm like, come on, Pete, let's go.
Yeah, but I liked it. I like the energy. So you got to surround yourself with good people. And I was like, you know what? Let's go. I don't care. Let's go. Let's have some fun.
Was that the same trip where we were in New York?
I think we hit all the bases that trip. Yeah, we went to New York, and
I think we ended up in LaGuardia.
We did.
And we did.
Yep.
And we ended up on a long layover, and we took the train and went to Hofbrauhaus.
That's right. I don't know if that was part of that same sequence, because I know we did 2 sequences together.
That might have been the second
for
one.
IOE.
Yeah.
That might have been the second one that we went to downtown New York. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was the second one because I was growing a mustache. I have a photo in my phone. I remember I saw it the other day, and I was like, "Oh my God, look at that!"
That's awesome, man.
Man, well, hey, Pete, thank you so much for being here. And here at Squawk Ident, we really focus on the journey of today's aviator and how the marketplace affects that journey. Lately, we've been talking a lot about what's been going on in the industry, a lot of the events that have kind of really shaped the pathways to this aviation profession. And what we wanted to focus on a little bit today was your journey and your start in aviation. Now, we were talking about on the pre-show that you got started at a relatively young age, not necessarily because it was something you wanted to do, but because it was something that your older sister was doing. How did that happen?
Yeah, I don't know. It was, I was probably, like I said, 12 or 13 years old. I just remember seeing a picture of myself, and it was a picture with myself and a couple of her friends. In the background was a Cessna 172, and that was my first flight experience. I went up with her flight instructor as she was getting a lesson, and so that was my first time experiencing GA, and that was really neat. I really enjoyed it. It was really cool. I mean, I had no idea what was going on, but I just knew that I liked it. And that was, like I said, when I was about 12 or 13, so young teenager. But then I didn't really, I kind of just forgot about it and, was being a rebel teen for years until I met my wife and got married. And it was around, I think, 20 years old that I really decided to pursue becoming a pilot, just a private pilot. I really had no intention of becoming an airline pilot. I just wanted to fly my friends around because we were doing these longer road trips. I'm in college. We're doing these road trips. We have a week off. Hey, let's drive to Colorado and go snowboarding. Let's drive to the Florida Keys and go kayaking and camping. And it would take us forever to get to these places. And I was living near an airport, South Bend Airport in Indiana, and I could see these airliners taking off and landing. And this idea came to my mind. If I could fly my friends to these places, we can spend an extra day or two snowboarding or kayaking or having a great time. Then we could fly back. It'd be a lot quicker. So without further ado, I went and I researched all the information, looked up the FAA requirements, and went and talked to a few flight instructors. And one in South Bend said, "You know what? I'm not the cheapest, but I will get you done. You come in prepared. I will get you done as soon as we can." And I told him, "Look, this says 40 hours. I'd like to get done in 40 hours. I don't want to waste time or money." And he said he can get me done. And so that's where I started.
You went to South Bend. Were you living in South Bend at the time, or did you travel out there to get this done in 40 hours?
No, I was actually living in South Bend. So I grew up in LaPorte, which is just to the west of South Bend. And I got married, and my wife and I moved into an apartment in South Bend. So I was living there at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So young couple, and you had a wife that was supporting this hobby of yours, this aspiration to go play with all your toys up in the air and your friends. And
yeah,
I think all of us have a similar story to that, right? Wife supporting the student pilot in training.
Yeah.
Yeah. She carried me for years, throughout getting private commercial instrument. I could easily say I couldn't have done it without her.
Yeah. I think we can all say that at some
Could
point.
all agree to that. Yeah. Same here.
Yeah. And it's all downhill from there, buddy.
That's right.
Like, she took me flying and look what happened. So that's great that you started out, you got that seed planted because your sister was going through. Now, did your sister ever complete her aviation certificates, or?
You know what? She did a solo. She got to solo, and she might have, I don't know the full story. I don't have that great of a relationship with my sister. I wish it was better. And I know that she's a little bit jealous of my career. And so I think we don't talk about it because it brings up bad feelings for her, because I think this was really her dream, and it was just something that I just kind of fell into and realized that this is really neat. But yeah, so she got to solo. And didn't have a very good experience with that. Ended up being up a little bit longer in the air than she thought, and was able to make it down safely. But I believe that's as far as she's gotten in her training.
Yeah, and it's an interesting point. And I have had students in the past share similar experiences where, they really love the idea of flying. They have a passion for it. And then when it comes time to being alone in the airplane or having to perform with a check ride and having to show proficiency, there's something that they just get hung up, and unfortunately it leaves a bad experience to where they stop. And it's sad because you want to help these students through. You want to help these individuals get through their goals. And unfortunately, sometimes that happens, that, there's check ride itis, there's the solo itis, there's all these kind of fears that hold you back on the ground when your only desire is really to soar up in the air. And it's tough. And sometimes it's really the flight instructor that makes all the difference in the world. Now, inevitably, it's the person. It's the individual that has to make up their mind and decide. And they can't really blame anybody else but themselves, because it's you who pushed yourself forward and through it. And if you're not comfortable with something, you just keep at it until you are. You do what you got to do until you are, till you find that confidence. So if you're out there listening and you love the idea of having a career in aviation and something is holding you back, whether that's emotional, physical, mental, there's always a hurdle that will be presented in front of you. Even at the top tier stages of this profession, there's always going to be a hurdle. The question is, are you passionate enough to learn and get the tools that you need to get past that hurdle, to become proficient and confident enough to get to it? And I really hope that if you're listening and you've been hesitating, that these kind of stories really are eye-opener. Get out there, go speak to a flight instructor. If you're not getting the answers that you want, go speak to another flight instructor, go speak to a DE or a medical examiner and get the answers you need, because this is a wonderful profession. At minimum, it's a wonderful hobby. So yeah. And I hope that your sister's not too hard on you for following this career progression. But we do understand, especially all three of us have been CFIs.
For every successful aviation career, everybody who's successful, they all have had their fair of hurdles and, like you said, bumps and bruises along the way. It's very rare that you hear somebody just skyrocket to astronaut status in the aviation field. I mean, there are a lot of hurdles to get through, and you just have to, just like Tony said, stay persistent. Keep your eye on the goal. Sometimes you have to figure out other ways to get around what you're trying to accomplish, and as long as you do that, you will attain your aviation goals.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Pete, you got your private and you got it done. Was it in 40 hours?
40.4. Yeah.
All right.
it was in 40.4. And so I didn't
kind of sells
think that
a
was
bona
anything.
fide Chuck Yeager here.
Yeah, right?
No, it wasn't me. It was my flight instructor and how he told me to prepare. Before I started my training, my sister had all these books. So she had the Jeppesen Private Pilot Manual. So I read the whole thing before I even started my training. I went through it. I didn't understand a lot of it, but I went through the whole thing. I looked at the FA requirements, and I was, just like we all are, I think, cheap, and I didn't want to waste time or money. So I read that book. I remember doing all the questions and answers and learning as much as I could before I went to training. So when he would bring topics up, I was relearning, and then I would go home and study again. So I learned each piece of information 3 times. I read it on my own. The flight instructor taught it to me, and then I went home and restudied it and prepared for the next lesson. So I think that really helped me mentally prepare for each lesson. And also Flight Simulator. I'm sitting in front of my computer right now, Microsoft Flight Simulator. I played the crap out of that when I was a kid. And I learned the fundamentals of flight, really, through that. Pull up, go up, pull up further, you'll stall, So just aerodynamics, was just kind of instilled in me with Flight Simulator, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Oh, that's great.
I don't know where I was going with it.
Well, that's it. You raise an interesting point. Now, there are those that, like Rob was saying, are just freaking Chuck Yeager, that they can do minimal studying, they get in the airplane, they understand the concepts, they understand, the mechanics, and they can fly stick and rudder like nobody's business. And then there are those that just naturally kind of get the regs, and they have a good memory, and they go, oh yeah, that's, I can require, this is required and that's required. But most are not that way. Most do not have that ability to just have everything memorized on the spot with minimal studying. I, Pete, am like you. I And Roger does make fun of me a little bit because Roger is a very intelligent individual, and he's one of those that I was just talking about where, yeah, okay, I studied it. You're fine. What are you studying? Why are you studying? He always makes fun of me for that. But I like to first lay the foundation, and like you said, read through the material, even if you don't get it, even if it's like reading German or something, it's like, okay, but it's there. And then later on, even years later, when you're back into it, all the pieces start to fit, and they fit easily, and you kind of grasp these advanced concepts a lot better, and then you can retain it because it's been not just in the rote memorization of the material that you just read it, you went, did the lesson, okay, you're done with the lesson, and now I've already forgotten everything because I don't need it. When you predetermine your path by studying and then going back and reviewing the mechanics physically, and then going back to study for the exam, it's like a 3-part process. And at the end of it, it's not just a rote memorized concept. It is in there, and you will always remember it because now it's part of your long-term memory. That is absolutely the most fantastic way, I think, personally, for myself, and it sounds like, Pete, for you as well, to do things. And I know Rob has the very
similar.
Yeah,
very similar.
But not everybody learns that way. There's many different types of learning styles. Any CFI or anyone learning to be a CFI, getting ready for that rating, has to read through a FAA authorized book that is the Principles of Learning. And I actually recommend that for the student pilot as well, because it's important to know how you learn, so you're not wasting time trying to learn in a method or technique that maybe your flight instructor is telling you how to study. But if you don't really learn well that way, it's important to recognize what your principles of learning are. What kind of a learner are you? So I highly recommend the Principles of Learning book. You're going to have to read it eventually if you go down that path anyway. So yeah. And thank you for sharing that with us, Pete. You actually, after you got your private, you ended up with some extra hours in the bank from the flight school, and you ended up taking a couple flights. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I think when I originally paid for my private pilot's license, I took out a loan. I didn't have all the money, of course, So I think they quoted me $7,000 or $10,000. I think I ended up spending $7,600, to be honest. I don't know why that number sticks out, but and I paid for maybe 50. I think I paid for 50 hours. So I finished up at 40 hours, 40.4, I believe. And I had either 5 or 10 hours left. I can't remember. So I went out to fly that, to actually use my rating. And some of those hours, my wife just got a job in Wisconsin. She finished up college and got a nursing degree. And so she actually got a job in Wisconsin where she used to live. And I flew her from South Bend to Wisconsin. She'd work and stay with her sister up there for a week at a time. She worked 7 days on, 7 days off. So I flew her up there a few times and back. And on one of the occasions coming back to South Bend, I was parking the airplane, tying it down and getting out of there and having a great time, but realizing I was burning through my hours and I was going to have to start paying for this. I already paid for this. And I saw these guys get off this jet, this really cool, fancy, I don't know, it's probably Beach Jet or Citation. And these two guys walk off. They have nice white shirts tucked in. They have these cool pants, nice shiny shoes, these cool things on their shoulders here, and these cool pilot sunglasses. And I realized, I was like, holy cow. It didn't even cross my mind, up until that point right there. Those guys were getting paid to fly. They were getting paid to have this much fun. And I was having to pay for all of this, and it just didn't make sense to me. I go, you know what? I want to get paid to fly. And that was it, and then I looked into everything else. What do I got to do? What's the easiest way to get paid to fly? And, originally, like I said, it was just to fly my friends around, but I realized that I was mistaken in that. It was way too expensive to fly my friends around the country. What was I thinking? They're broke, or they're as broke as I am, so we're not going to split this, it's going to be thousands of dollars to get to Colorado and back. And then also try to pay the resort fee to go snowboarding or whatever it was. So, anyways, after that, I decided I want to get paid to fly, and went down the rabbit hole of chasing this aviation bug, I guess, and spent lots of money and did lots of studying. And over the course of a few years, I got all my ratings, and sure, we can discuss that. And it was a great time. I really, really enjoyed learning, and I really enjoyed getting all these ratings.
Yeah. Well, so what was the next step for you? I mean, here you had 10 hours to play with, you were running out of time that you had prepaid, and now you see this, you experience this feeling that, all right, this is for me, this is what I want to do. How did you progress from there?
Okay, so we were living in South Bend at the time. This was in Indiana, and so I got my license in September. I still had to finish. I graduated in December. My wife got a job, so she was already working in Wisconsin. So she was staying with her sister, and we needed to move. So I actually lived in Indiana while she lived with her sister in Wisconsin, and was working. And the next step was moving to Wisconsin. So after I finished school, it was in I think December of 2008 is when I graduated college, and then we moved to Wisconsin. I moved there without a job. My wife had the job. She was supporting me at the time, and I needed to find a job, and I needed to find something to do. So I was new to aviation, and my flight instructor got me signed up on like AOPA, I believe, pilot or student pilot. And so I was surfing on their website, and I saw something about volunteer opportunities, because I wanted to create a new world for myself, a whole new group of friends, because I grew up in northern Indiana. All my friends and family were there, and I was leaving, So I found this volunteer opportunity through AOPA, this local small airport, Capitol Drive Airport, in just west of Milwaukee, that were searching for volunteers to help run their FBO throughout the day. It was all volunteer operated, and they needed somebody to open the doors, and if an airplane came, pump the gas, sell the gas, and just be there, mow the grass at the airport. So I went there and started volunteering, and it was just filled. If you go today, there's at least 3 or 4 old guys sitting there, old pilots sitting there drinking coffee and just hangar flying. And it was so much fun just to be in that world. Everybody had an airplane. There was ex-airline pilots, military pilots, GA pilots, people who owned airplane, renters, students. And it was just a great place to go and hangar fly and talk. And that's kind of the next step, So I went there and got involved, and I realized I was going to be pursuing this career. That was the whole point. I'm pursuing this career, but I need to build some time. I was at 40 hours. I needed to find an airplane to rent, and I needed to build, I believe it was cross-country time for your instrument rating. Is that correct?
Right.
So
75 hours or something like that.
Yeah. So there was a Cherokee 140 there that I got checked out in, and I had a credit card with a big credit limit, and I flew for a year, and I had the most fun. I flew all over the place, just renting and building cross-country time, and also trying to make it as cheap as I could, trying to split time with other people that I met at the airport there.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And so you ended up joining a flight club over at Charlie 89, or Sylvania Airport in Wisconsin. How did you get in? How did you get involved with that?
That's correct. Yeah. So there was this really new, there was this flight school, and they had new airplanes. So I got my time. I spent a year flying and doing all this fun stuff. And now it was time to pursue the instrument rating, and I'm trying to find the cheapest, most quick way to get this rating. And this place was fairly new. It was called Aviation, and Sturtevant, Wisconsin, Charlie 89. And they had a flight simulator. I think it was a Frasca 172 G1000, and they had a Cessna 172 with the exact same setup. So I could go and spend half of my training in the simulator and then go finish up the rest of it in the airplane.
Yeah.
And so they also quoted me a very cheap price, and it was kind of a drive for me. It was about an hour from my house, but I believe I spent maybe $4,000 on the instrument rating, and I thought that was relatively cheap.
Yeah. And were you working throughout this process where you were?
Yeah, that's right. I was. So after I moved to Wisconsin, I was unemployed, and I was just an airport bum for a few months. And before I moved, my last summer job was spreading fertilizer for True Green in South Bend. And my boss told me if I ever needed a job, just to give him a call. So I moved to Wisconsin. I didn't have a job. I was an airport bum for a few months, hanging out, just making new friends in the aviation world. And I realized, okay, I need, I got a degree, this is in 2008, and I got a degree, I should get a job. And I interviewed with a few nonprofits, just to do some accounting work. And I didn't get the job because I was outbeat by guys who had previous, tons of experience. So I suckered up, and I called my boss over at True Green Lawn Care Place. I said, hey, look, I'm here in Wisconsin. I need a job. Could you, put a referral in for me at the local True Green? So he did. I went there, and they asked me if I wanted to do spread fertilizer or do sales. And I said, well, I already know how to spread fertilizer. I don't know anything about sales. So I chose sales, and they hired me as a salesman for True Green. And I went door to door selling lawn care, making people spend money on their grass.
Nice.
And that was really cool. That really changed my life, honestly, because I still have this small stutter, and I was very nervous to meet new people, to talk to new people, and to speak in public, let alone go up to a stranger's house and have them give me $800 for the grass, but it kind of broke open the shell. It was kind of a life-changing event, getting a degree, getting a private pilot's license, and, just breaking out of my shell and learning how to communicate. So it was all really neat. And yeah, so I was working at the time. That was your original question. I was working as a lawn care salesman while I was going through my training.
And that's interesting because as a pilot, communication is one of the languages that we have to become proficient in. And a lot of non-pilots don't really understand what that means. But when you're at the controls of an airplane and you're in busy airspace and the radio traffic is nonstop, let's just say New York Center, and you have to get the word in and get out, and communicating, it becomes a skill, an art form, if you will. So at this time that you spent door to door working on communicating and better ways of communicating, actually, not only does it help you in your aviation career in terms of radio communications, it also helps you with interpersonal communications with your co-pilots or your captains or your first officers or whatever. So yeah, it all lends itself to a successful career. And thank you for sharing that, because that really does give us a little bit of an insight on how it's not just flight training. It's not just nonstop. I'm not working. All I'm doing is spending time. I mean, you could go that route. Some of us have done that. It's extremely expensive, not just for the cost of the training in such an impacted way, but also the fact that you're not bringing in an income, possibly during that time of training. It really does hurt. And every pilot out there has had to struggle with that cost of training.
Yeah, definitely. I would, that just brings up a point. I remember I was one decision away from going to ATP flight school. It was right before I decided to go to this other flight school to do my instrument rating. and that was taking a huge loan out for whatever, 50, 60, $70,000, whatever they quoted me, but I was on the phone with the lady, and then she said, okay, everything's set up, all you got to do is just say yes and we'll get the ball rolling, and I didn't feel 100% comfortable with it. I remember I was in my driveway on the phone and my wife was next to me, and she might have even been pregnant with our first child at the time. And I remember I would have to leave her and do flight training for however long, wherever ATP flight school was, Chicago, Tampa, or I don't know what their locations are, but it just didn't feel right, so I didn't do it that way. And I decided to go with a local FBO or local FBO route and stay at home,
Yeah.
And, fortunately my wife was there to support me with it.
Yeah, you're very fortunate. And that route actually paid off because, we kind of teased your experience in the intro, but my God, what have you not done in aviation? Your journey continues on was it Waukesha?
Waukesha. Yeah. So Waukesha. So I got my
Waukesha. What's this? All these Wisconsin
Waukesha.
names.
Waukesha, Wisconsin.
Waukesha.
Yeah.
So have you seen the movie Grumpy Old Men? Isn't that where they're from? Waukesha.
Oh, is it?
Oh, you haven't seen? Oh man, that's a great movie.
No, I've seen the movie, but I don't know if. Yeah, I'll have to rewatch it. That's kind of fun.
Yeah.
No, wait a minute. Has she got big thighs? No. Then what's the problem? If I was a young fella like you, I'd be mounting every woman in Waukesha.
Anyway, I didn't mean to distract you, but you don't hear much about that unless, I'm like, oh my God, it's in a movie.
Yeah, definitely. I'll have to look into that. I like watching older movies. It's kind of fun. Yeah. But anyway, so I was working for True Green, and I stayed there for about a year, just saving up money. I got the instrument rating, and the next was the commercial rating, right? I had to pursue that. And I interviewed for a manager position at the lawn care company. And they said I could, no, it was between me and another guy. They chose the other guy and for the manager position, the sales manager position. And so they chose him. And I said, okay, cool, that's fine. I'm going to get out of this. And I'm going to pursue aviation even further. I'm going to quit this good paying sales job and go fuel airplanes and be a ramper, park airplanes, and just meet pilots and just make a book full of names, right? And so I decided to do that. In a week later, that guy quit, and they offered me the manager position at the lawn care place, and I declined it. I said, sorry, I've already made up my mind. I'm not going to take the manager position. I'm going to go fuel airplanes. And they thought I was crazy. And but it was great. It was the best move I've probably ever made. It was the best job I've probably ever had. It was so much fun. I went and fueled airplanes. There was a flight school there. I got to know the flight instructors. Every day I was talking to pilots. They would get off the airplane. I'd park the airplane. I would drive them to the hotel. These are all charter pilots, GA pilots. And I would ask for advice every single ride. I would say, hey, look, I'm pursuing aviation. What's your advice? Anyways, so I did that. And I also at Waukesha, that's where I did my commercial pilot training. And actually, my instructor is now at Legacy Airlines, and he was actually at Sandpiper as well. He flowed.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah.
Small world.
But it is, yeah, definitely.
Wow.
So
that was a commercial, yeah.
What amazes me about this story is your career could have gone a whole different route if you would have been selected on the first go with that manager position. You could be managing True Green right now.
Yeah, that's right. I would have had a group of sales guys underneath me.
Nothing beats lawn and lawn care accessories. I'll tell you what.
That's pretty good. Yeah, no kidding, right? I left that job just to go fuel airplanes, but man, I loved it. I could see myself, retiring, just hanging out at an airport talking to guys. And being around airplanes, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's quite an addicting lifestyle, is hanging around, hangar talking and hangar flying for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Now, after your commercial, what was the progression? Were you immediately flying for hire, or did you continue your education with aviation?
Okay, cool. So here I am. I got a commercial pilot certificate, right? And I believe now my wife's pregnant with our second son. And all I wanted to do, so I finally made it to this point. I have a commercial pilot certificate, and I was looking into, what can I do? What are the first jobs? What can you do? All I wanted to do, and I haven't done it yet, is tow banners in Florida. Listening, have a Bose headset on, listening to some music, 500 feet over a beach, and just cruising around, just towing banners. And I could get paid to do it. And I wanted to do it so bad, but I couldn't leave. My wife had a great job here in Wisconsin. We were pregnant, and my wife said, "No, there's no way we're moving to Florida so you could tow banners." And I wasn't about to leave her just for that, right? So, anyways, I was like, "Well, crap. Well, there goes that idea." And so I had to look into other opportunities. And after talking with everybody, all the pilots said, "Get your flight instructor certificate. You get a flight instructor certificate and you can work just about anywhere." And I guess that was a little bit more professional, and that's the route to go. It's just towing banners. Nothing against guys who just did that, but it's a lot of fun. That's all I wanted to do. But personally for me, I had to stay home, and I pursued the flight instructor certificate, CFI. And as soon as I got done with that, actually, we were talking, like you said, in the pre-show. As soon as I got done with that afternoon, I made the phone call and I got a job as a flight instructor as soon as I passed that check ride.
For you, It was banner towing. Rob, did you have a dream job that you didn't get a chance to do in terms of aviation?
I think anything that involved flying was a dream job for me. Beggars couldn't be choosers. I when I got the job as a flight instructor, I was ecstatic. I was like, this is awesome. I had no goal in aviation as I plugged through the ratings, other than just to get my CFI certificate and kind of like Pete said, just to fly, just to be able to fly around and get paid. And so my story, kind of takes off from there. I had no aspirations to even join an airline. It just so happens that they were hiring, and my instructor told me, "Hey, now's a good time to apply for an airline because they're hiring." And I was like, "Okay, how do I do that?" So, and a week later, I'm at in-dock for Sandpiper. So that's kind of how it went for me. Mine was dumb luck. So, I don't know what else to add to that. That's how it was.
Yeah. For me, something that absolutely intrigued me, and I to this day think it's extremely interesting. I wanted to be a crop duster.
Oh yeah.
I wanted a tail dragger, crop duster. I wanted to come in, and just totally. Yeah. But that never panned out.
That cross, I actually got a ride in an air tractor before I started flight training. And it was when I was in the military, based out in Clovis, New Mexico. One of my friends had a farm, and they irrigated everything, or, they fertilized it with an air tractor. And they're like, "Hey, you want to go for a ride?" I'm like, "Okay, sounds cool." And whoa, that was cool, man. We're flying underneath telephone lines. The wheels are like, a foot and a half above the crops. And we're just, it was a totally different. I've never been really in an airplane other than in an airliner up until that point. So that was like, whoa, we're doing like these super, I don't know what you call them, Illiman moves, climb up, bank over, come back to Chandels. Oh my gosh. I was just fighting to hold back my lunch, It was just good time.
Yeah. And for those that are in GA now and you're going through these maneuvers and you're doing S-turns and you're doing, chandelles and turns around a point and stuff, and you're thinking, do I really need to get enjoy it while you can? Because once you start getting into jet airplanes and swept wing aircraft, Forget it. You're not doing any of that. Not
Yeah,
anymore.
those
You
were
can bank
fun
while you
days.
can.
Yeah, those are actually really fun. Yeah.
Yeah. So you ended up getting a job. You took a quick course for your CFI, went down to St. Louis and got your quick course taken care of, get your CFI knocked out. Did you get your CFI and that's it? Or did you progress to a double I and MEI later on down the road?
Yeah. Well, that afternoon I called and I was hired as a flight instructor at Sylvania Charlie 89. And I worked there as a regular flight instructor for probably about a year or so, or maybe 6 months. And then they offered to give me the double I. We had the simulator. And so while I was working for that company, I did my training for the double I and then got the double I through them.
You did your CFI, worked for a while, got your double I at a flight school. And how did that turn into flying otters?
Okay, yeah. So at that local airport, or at that same airport, there's a jump operation. And they had a King Air, and they had a couple incidents, and finally they had one accident where the King Air was totaled, I could say. And the flight school I was working with, there were some complications, with the owners and with the flight instructors. You hear there are some bad apples in aviation, and this just wasn't the greatest place to be. So actually, we all left in one day. They wanted to they wanted us to re-sign a contract, and we realized that they were just kind of stringing us along and not paying us properly. I spent some time there, and it was time for me to move on. And at the local airport they're flying big airplanes. They had a King Air, they had a twin turbine aircraft. And that's what I needed. I needed some multi-time. So actually, before I left the flight school, I went and got my multi-engine add-on certificate. And that was at a place in Traverse City in a old Piper Apache, I believe it was. And that was fun. That was a lot of fun. You can get that done, 3-4 days. You come in prepared, you get your your tests all completed. So I went and got that. As soon as I got that done, I walked over to not the flight school, the jump operation. And I talked to the owner. I said, "Hey, I'd like to be your skydive pilot." And he said, "Well, we just crashed your King Air. We are looking into getting a twin otter." And he said, "Okay." He goes, "I'll try to get you some flying to build up some time." He goes, "I'm part of this network where they move, skydive aircraft around the country, and I'll get you involved in that, and we'll get you some time and get you some experience." So my first flight in a twin otter. Well, so probably a month later. This is in December. I'm unemployed. I left the flight school. I was collecting unemployment, and it's December. My wife's at work. I'm at home watching our two sons, I believe at the time. And I get a call from the skydive operator. He says, "Hey, there's a twin otter leaving Florida tomorrow morning for Mexico." And he goes, "If you want to go, you could help fly it. You could be the co-pilot." And so I said, "Okay, when's it leaving?" He said, "Tomorrow morning at like 9 a.m. And this is probably noon the day before. And so I had to call my wife. I had to figure out babysitting. And I said, "Honey, I'm going to Mexico. I'm going to fly a twin otter to Mexico." And I said, but it leaves from Florida. So here I am in Wisconsin in the middle of winter. And I took the kids up to the babysitter, and I actually took a motorcycle. I was so cheap. I took a motorcycle. The roads were clear to the Milwaukee airport because I could park it for free.
I can only picture this. Snow on the ground.
I didn't know how long
20 degrees outside.
Yeah. I didn't know how long I was going to be gone, or, because they were ferrying the airplane down there. We had a part for another crash King Air that was in the airplane, and they were going to train the new guy there in the twin otter while the King Air was getting fixed. So I didn't know how long I was going to be there. So I just took a backpack on the motorcycle, drove to Milwaukee. I paid for the ticket from Milwaukee to Where do we go? Milwaukee to Atlanta. I was on Delta. Milwaukee to Atlanta, Atlanta to Miami. And then I landed in Miami around midnight, and I took a cab up to, I don't know, I remember it was like $190. It was crazy. But I needed to get this time right.
Wow.
I was like, this is my in. I'm flying a Twin Otter to Mexico. What?
Yeah.
And so I paid for a ride up to this local airport, got in around 1 a.m. And I didn't even know where I was supposed to be or who I was supposed to meet. So I'm looking on Google Maps. I open my phone and I find some big airplanes that look like Twin Otters on Google Maps, and crawled around the fence of the airport and started walking around, and I found a Twin Otter, and I crawled in. I had a sleeping bag with me, and I fell asleep. I woke up in the morning, the airplane's, moving around. It was getting towed and getting fueled. And I poked my head out and I said, hey, is this airplane going to Mexico? And the ramper's like, yeah, the pilot's going to be here in a few minutes. So I met the guy, and that was my first that was my first multi-turbine flying, and the pilot I was flying with, he just fell asleep. He took off. I was just flying the pink line, and then he was teaching me along the way as well.
Yeah.
But and then we flew to Mexico. So yeah.
What an amazing story.
Damn, man.
Yeah.
So okay, let's see here. You hopped the fence, you slipped aboard an aircraft, you had no idea where that aircraft was going. Okay, talk about beach bum, baby, or airport bum.
Young and dumb.
But that's awesome. That's a story.
Anything to get the time, right? I mean, that's kind of how it was. Yeah, that's how we were.
That's right.
And that's it. And that's how that segment of your journey began, is flying around, ferrying aircraft around and building time and twins. And that led to another job, same place, being a jumper dumper. What's a jumper dumper?
A jumper dumper. Yeah. So I got a little bit of time flying that. They got that company finally bought a Twin Otter that spring, and I wasn't the only pilot. They hired another guy who had plenty of time in a Twin Otter. Here I am, freshly minted, and I was just kind of the backup. They had a 182, so I flew that, and I was trying to learn as much as I could in a Twin Otter. And then when they could, I would fly that with an instructor and do jumper loads. So I probably flew that Otter. I probably got about 100 hours in it, over the course of the year. But primarily I was flying the 182, but the Twin Otter was where it was at. That was the fun one to fly. Yeah. So I flew for them, and flew the Twin Otter when I could, the 182 most of the time. They actually also ended up having me fly at other drop zones. Like, they're all kind of tight knit, and if another drop zone needed a pilot, if they had an event going on, they would send me with the airplane, and I would go fly it at this other drop zone for the weekend.
Nice.
And I remember one year I spent, I think once a month I flew up to Door County in Wisconsin, and flew up there as just their fill-in pilot for a weekend once a month. And that was a lot of fun. I was able to take the airplane up there. They put me up at the drop zone owner's house up there right on Lake Michigan, fly jumpers for the weekend and fly home. It was kind of fun. But after doing that for about a year, I realized that skydiving is fun, but it wasn't paying the bills. I'm having a great time. My wife's working her butt off. We've got 2 kids, and I'm doing everything I can to get flight time, but I'm not getting paid hardly anything. And skydiving, the world of skydiving, it's great. I love it. I wish I could retire doing it. It's a lot of fun. But it wasn't the professional career that I was after, I guess. I realized that there's a lot more to this aviation industry and, professionalism. And so I needed to pursue something else. And a friend of mine who worked at the flight school that we worked at in Sylvania, he left there as well. He didn't want to sign the new contract. So he went to another company and was flying charter. He was flying charter. He was a charter pilot for him. And he said, hey, look, we can bring you in, we can bring you on. And he goes, come on as a flight instructor, and then I'll get you into the charter department. So I came on as a flight instructor there. They paid more, they paid appropriately. And then he got me into flying charter in a Cessna 414, I believe it was. Yeah, Cessna 414. So that was my first 135 charter operator. And I flew maybe a couple hundred hours with them. And they also had a King Air, and I did a couple 91 trips sitting in the right seat in that King Air. After working for them for probably year and a half or so, they weren't pursuing any additional charter opportunities. They were only riding out the customers that they had, and taking care of them. And I wanted to go to school for the King Air, and I wanted to sell more charter. I had the sales experience. I said, "Hey, look, let's get this charter operation up and running." And I remember talking to the owner. I said, "Hey, look, let's do this. Let's get this thing going. Let's sell some more charter." And he said, "Look, Pete," he goes, "You're the type of guy who's gonna go on and fly for other people and have a great career, blah blah blah." He goes, "I've already done that here." He had his heyday, so he was getting ready to retire. He was getting ready to sell the business. He wasn't interested, in pursuing any further opportunities. So that's when I realized that I needed to kind of move on to the next step.
Yeah. And the next step, you were interested in the King Air. And how did you go from that to actually flying a King Air?
Well, so after realizing that they weren't going to send me to school to fly the King Air to get, this more valuable twin turbine time, I had a friend who got hired at this local cargo company, and out of Milwaukee, that was Freight Runners Express, and they flew Beech Model 99s for cargo, and they also had two King Air 350s that they operated charter in. And so I said, "Okay, great, I'll go there. I'll interview with them." And so I did. I got a position as a captain on the Beech 99 airliner, and well, we call it it's the model airliner, but it was gutted. It was a cargo airplane. There's no seats back there, just a big open flying tube. And after doing that for a year, I was able to maneuver into the King Air 350 as a charter pilot. So I flew charter for them and also filled in on the cargo side. Then they ended up getting a King Air 200, and I went to school for that. I also became an instructor for that company. Instructed, did IOE, flew the King Air 200, the 350, and filled in on the 99. It was a lot of work. But it was a great experience. I learned a lot at that company. That was the first, real job, 135 single pilot, IFR, Northern Wisconsin. That was the first real job. Professionalism. That was where I learned a lot.
Yeah. And what's amazing to hear your journey is that we're sitting here, we've been listening to you explain how your journey progressed, and I'm thinking, man, this guy's been flying for 30 years. This is an amazing career that you've had,
Yeah.
but yet we haven't even scratched the surface. How many years elapsed from when you first got your private pilot license to when you ended up leaving Freight Runners?
Okay, so I got my private pilot's license in 2008. I think I left Freight Runners 2017.
So in 9 years, you amassed all this experience from flying, 172s and 185s and all this to King Airs to Beech 99s, amazing, this progression that you've had. You never, even though you spent years at particular places, you never really got stuck growing roots. You always were looking forward to the next step because you had an end goal in mind. And that end goal was to fly for an airline. And that experience and opportunity came up when?
Well, when I was at the freight company, I realized that a lot of the guys were leaving. Everybody was leaving. The airlines started this big pilot shortage that everyone talks about. Started happening. The regionals were starting to offer crazy amounts of money, to come on and to fly with them. So a lot of my friends at the cargo place, they left. Every month or so, another guy was leaving, and he's going to this regional, he's going to this regional, he's going to this 135 operator. It started booming. The industry really started booming. And I couldn't leave freight runners. I could have left a long time ago. And went to the airlines, but I just couldn't afford to. They paid me really well to fly all three airplanes and to instruct, and I spent that time just paying off all the debt that I accumulated, paying for all these ratings. So when I was in a position where I had this debt paid off, and that was after about 4 years, that's when I realized, okay, now I can take a pay cut, even though the regionals are paying, we're paying the most they ever did at the time. It was still a lot less than I was making. So it was going to be a pay cut for me to leave my current position to go to the airlines. But after paying off the debt, that's when I realized that, okay, look, we're finally in a position where we can take the pay cut. And in the long run, the airlines, that's a career move, and you can make a lot of money. So in 2017, I left Freight Runners and I interviewed with Sandpiper Airlines.
And we're going to hear a lot more about your journey in aviation, your progression through the 121 carrier, and get your take on the chaos that's happening all over the industry right after the break. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from the break. Well, we've been talking with Pete Tenderenda and his journey in aviation. And I got to say, and Rob, correct me if, you feel differently. This guy had his hands in every single cookie jar in Wisconsin.
Yeah, it's really inspirational. It's really amazing to hear his story.
Yeah, it makes me feel lazy.
I know, me too.
Well, Pete, your journey continued in 2017 when you were hired on at Sandpiper, and that's where your journey and my journey met. We already talked about on the intro of the podcast, this episode, that we met during IOE, and I was giving you IOE. It was part of one of the highlights of my career anyway over at Sandpiper, is that time when I got to meet all these wonderful people. And when you fly along and you kind of like just go through the motions and you talk to people and you find out a little bit about them, that's one thing. But when you are as part of a crucial part of their journey as an IOE check airman is, where you don't really ever forget your check airmen, especially your first ones, your first trip on IOE. Those trips are special. Easy or not, challenging or not, those trips are special. And, thank you for being a part of that for me. And our trip, as we mentioned, was a little bit unorthodox. We ended up having some cool experiences in both Miami and later on flying together again through New York. But let's focus on how that progression was for you. Here you were, experienced. You had quite some time both in sales and in aviation and as a flight instructor. And now you were going through your first 121 ground school. What was that experience like?
Well, you know what? I did a lot of research before choosing Sandpiper as my airline to go to. everybody was hiring, everyone's regional was hiring. There was a lot of 135 operators hiring. There were cargo operations hiring. At that point, you could get a job anywhere, and so after talking with some people and doing research, I chose Sandpiper. And the one thing that I did not research was the training department. I've always heard, okay, airline training is great. It's an airline. How could it not be great? And I tell you, my first week there was absolute chaos. I was part of the biggest class that they've ever had. And the company wasn't prepared. They weren't prepared for us. And it raised a really big red flag for me. And I almost left. There were some red flags that first week, and I couldn't believe that I was a part of this, and this was how it was. So my first week, IOE, they were just overwhelmed, and I was trying to be at peace with that and to participate and graduate. But like I said, it was chaos, and I almost left that first week. I'm glad I've stuck around, because I am where I am now. But it was eye-opening.
Yeah. And so do you think that the struggle was because the schoolhouse was overwhelmed with just being bulging at the seams with as many people that were there trying to get through there at that time?
Of course. Yeah, of course. I think their normal class size was somewhere in the 20s. I don't know. What was your class size when you were hired, if you don't mind me asking? Or both of you?
Yeah, Rob, you went first. What was your...
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think I had a class it was small. I mean, INDOC was big, but we had, once we got through INDOC, I think it was only like 12 people or something like that. So it was a small class.
Yeah. I got hired in December of 2006. The company's goals were to hire 700 pilots in 2007. It was going to be the most pilots they have hired in a year since prior to 9/11. And during our INDOC, which was day one, indoctrination, we had 42 people in the class. We had to, and at the time we were at the Legacy Training Center. So we were upstairs in the sim bay, and the classrooms were big. They removed the partition wall between two classrooms and made one big classroom. And they had to bring in chairs from other rooms for everyone to have a place to sit. We were elbow to elbow with everyone. And then after day two, they started separating people by aircraft. And on my long-term day two, which was for the Embraer 145, we had 26 people. So it's still a reasonable amount, but not overwhelming. And you said how many were yours?
So we had 70 some people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I believe that was their biggest class to date. But before this, each class before that was, 50, 60, 67, so they had hundreds of people there going through the training center, and I was a part of a 76 class or 76, 72. But then the following class, 70 guys, 60 guys, so they were just completely overwhelmed with the number of new hires. And it was chaos. It was absolute chaos,
Yeah.
And every pilot who was qualified to fly was out on the line flying. And the people teaching INDOC were just old retired guys who had never worked at the airline or didn't have experience on the jet and were teaching ground systems just by reading a slide,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
So it was definitely challenging.
It's like that now. That's how it is now, believe it or not.
Yeah. Over at Legacy, when you do ground school, when you're in systems, you're being taught by at least for the Airbus, an Airbus ground instructor that knows the airplane phenomenally. I mean, these guys are top notch, don't get me wrong, but they're not pilots. Most of them are either retired or just not a pilot, at least not in the 121 sense of the word.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, that's a very common thing. It goes to the same theory that we've been talking about now for many years about when you contract out things and, you know, you need all hands on deck. That's unfortunately what has to happen is you get contracted out training and contracted out services. So, I mean,
but to your point, that's because everybody's out on the line. It's all hands on deck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I mean, prior to this, you know, I went to flight safety, which is a professional pilot place, right? Teaching, and you know, I worked at a 135 operator, and I've been through professional training, and that was pretty good. You know, flight safety did a really good job of, you know, and I went there multiple times for the King Air 200, King Air 350. You know, not only initial but also recurrent training. You know, 4 or 5 times. You know. So to come see the 121 side of it and to see how kind of wild it was really eye-opening for me. But the longer I was there, you know, IOE, the first few days were just, or not IOE, INDOC, in the first few days were just nuts. But as we got into, the further I got along in training, the better the instructors became. You know, as soon as we got to the simulator portion, well, okay, now these guys know what they're doing. You know, these guys know how to fly. And then, of course, when you're out on the line, now you're with guys like Tony, who are IOE guys, and check airmen who have the experience. So it progressively got better, but that first week, there were some red flags.
Yeah. So I think the lesson here is, you know, if you're thinking, hey, what the heck's going on? What did I get myself into? Sometimes a little bit of patience pays off.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Participate, graduate, you know, and just do what you're told, you know, and you'll get through it.
Yeah. You'll learn. I learned you have to be like a chameleon, man. You really have to just kind of, you know, go with your environment. I mean, there's a lot of adapt and overcome in the whole, you know, journey through this career, but especially like right now when you get into a 121 training environment, because they are experiencing, you know, numbers that they've never had to deal with before, and you know they need as many people as they can get, so they're just trying to get you all on in the books and then into training as quickly and as most efficiently as possible. And there's not, I mean, for as big as a company as Legacy and Sandpiper are, you know, there's behind the scenes, there's really not that many people, you know, doing all the, you know, the behind the scenes work. I mean, there's a lot of people, but, you know, from a numbers per se, you know, we got 15,000 pilots. You know, there's probably 20 people, maybe 30 at most, that are doing everything behind the scenes for all these hundreds of people coming in the door. It's a lot. It's a lot to do.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And you just have to be patient, and not just for the employees, but for the passengers as well. I mean, yeah. And we'll talk a little bit about patience out on out of the airports right now in a bit.
Segue.
So your journey over at Sandpiper can I say it's been relatively positive?
It's been great. It's been really, really great. It's been nothing but positive. You know, I have recommended friends to come here, and their journeys have been a little bit different, but it's all about how you look at it and what time, I guess, you get hired. I had a friend who got hired just a little bit after I did. I recommended him to come on board, and he just got stuck on reserve not at home, you know, out in New York, was sitting standby, never flying. And it was just absolute chaos for him. You know, he hated it. And, you know, for me, my experience has been nothing but positive. I've really enjoyed it. And that's why I've stayed. And that's why I decided to stay here and to upgrade, you know?
Yeah. Now, you could have upgraded a while ago. I remember we were talking a couple of weeks ago, and you were saying, yeah, I could have upgraded a while ago, but, you know, with the kids and the family, and I've decided to stay in the seat because the pay is not that bad and the time off is not that bad. Do you find that is a better route for most people with families to just wait for the quality of life to be there?
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said better route for most people with families, because that's really what ultimately comes first, is the wife and kids. And when I came here to Sandpiper, the previous job, I was gone all the time. I was working all the time. And my home life wasn't that great. And so coming here to Sandpiper, getting onto the reserve list and being pretty high on the reserve list, where I would hardly ever get called. I mean, I honestly went 3 years without barely flying here on the reserve list. And I would work, pretty much I would just pick up open time on my days off and just never get called on my on days, because we hired so many pilots that the reserve list was huge. There was a point where there was 100 people beneath me on the reserve list. So I would never get called,
Wow.
at all.
Wow.
So the quality of life for me was absolutely fantastic. I was getting paid, 75 hours worth of pay, and I wasn't working at all. I would have to come in to get my landings in, and I was doing all this from home. I live on a lake here at home, so being on the lake, fishing, swimming, snorkeling, having my phone with me, in a waterproof case, hanging out with my family, so definitely by far for me, or for guys with families, waiting to upgrade really worked out for me. Yeah. I would rather just stay as a senior first officer now and just get the captain pay. I really don't want to go to training. I'm getting paid, I'm getting paid the captain pay. So that really helps, but I'd rather stay. I'd love to hold my FO seniority,
Yeah. Now explain that. So when you bid for equipment over at Sandpiper and you're awarded equipment, when do you start getting paid your captain pay?
As soon as the bid closes and as soon as you're awarded. So I was awarded back in spring. And so I've spent, and I get to my line, when I bid for my monthly schedule, I bid with my FO seniority, but my pay is at the captain seniority.
Wow.
So I'm getting paid 4-year captain pay, but flying as an FO and bidding FO trips,
That's new.
Yeah,
I didn't have that when I was there.
I'd be picking up OT as much as I can right now.
Last month I had the opportunity. I had vacation lined up, and I dropped that. I covered the drop trips with my sick time. I picked up 30 hours of 200% of captain pay over a month. So it was quite the paycheck,
Oh, yeah.
So definitely trying to take advantage of the system.
Now, speaking of the system, I mean, this is one thing that when you come from a GA world or a charter world, and then you come onto an airline, learning the contract, how you get paid, and how to work the system, picking up trips, dropping trips, getting pay guarantee, not getting paid guarantee, sick pay, how that works. That's one of the hardest parts. I mean, here you are new to a company and you're trying to learn an aircraft and systems and the simulator call outs and flows and procedures and checklists. And at the same time, as soon as you pass that type ride and you're out on the flight line and you've completed IOE, now you're on your own and you've got to figure all this stuff out. Now, some people freak out about it and others have friends that, went before them. For me, that was Rob. Hey, Rob, how do I pick up a trip? He had been with the company, a year before I came over. So I always seem to have a go-to person. That's why it's important to make friends in your training class and to network, because some of those people, it might be new for them as well, but maybe they have friends that have been at that company for some time. It can help navigate all the complexities of contracts. But there's something that out here at Legacy Airlines over the past few weeks, we've been going, hey, did you hear about those guys at Sandpiper? No, what? Premium pay? 300%?
300.
Now,
super. I can't remember what they said.
Super premium? What?
Super critical coverage.
Please explain this to me as if I didn't know what the heck you're talking about.
Okay, well, super critical. So overtime, OT, overtime is usually paid at 150%. And now they have critical coverage where they pay 200%. And that's what I was able to pick up in the previous month, which was fantastic, And now for the first time ever, at my 4 years here at Sandpiper, we got a message saying super critical coverage paid at 300% of your normal salary. So that was absolutely incredible. So if I were to pick up, it would be about the same rate as a legacy captain who's been there for probably 5-6 years. And I actually right now I'm on a stretch of 5 or 6 days, and I had the opportunity. That's where it was actually offered over the course of this weekend, and I didn't take it. I said, you know what, I would rather spend some time at home, with my wife and kids and just relax.
That's probably the smartest move right now.
Now that you got a little padding in the bank account from the other super critical trips.
That's correct.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So
so
you heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen, on the Squawk Ident Podcast. Yeah. If you're a regional airline pilot right now and you fly for what we call Sandpiper here on the show, to protect us because we don't represent our companies in any way, as the disclaimer says at the beginning of the podcast, you could be making more than mainline captains picking up super critical coverage on your days off.
That's awesome.
Oh, now there are pros and cons to this theory. And I can remember as far back as when I was over at the Sandpiper myself. The union stance is, or at least it was at the time, don't pick up open time at all. Don't pick up critical coverage. No matter what cherry they dangle in front of you, don't do it. Force the airline to staff appropriately. There are many pilots out on the street that want a job. And if you don't pick up open time and you just fly your contractual schedule, the company will then be forced to hire more pilots and therefore make the quality of life and the contract compliance a lot more regular. Then, as they couldn't find anybody to hire because it got harder and harder with this pilot shortage that we keep hearing about, then they said, well, okay, you can pick up, but pick up and this, buy the contract and stuff. Now it's like all hands on deck, 300%. And the union's like, go for it. Yeah, we got you that 300%. Good God, good job. So times have changed. With the philosophies of picking up critical coverage. Over here at Legacy, we've been going, how come we don't have 300%?
Right.
I guarantee you there wouldn't be any trips in open time, and those reserve pilots would just be sitting at home going, there's nothing open, so I guess I'll just sit here and get paid.
Yeah.
So it just depends on how you're looking at it and from which side of the management fence.
Yep. And the guys that make the most money are the guys that know how to guys who know the contract and they know all the little, I wouldn't call them loopholes, but just exceptions to the contract where they can create their own schedule to capitalize on these situations.
Yep.
And
it's all about the technique and bidding.
Yeah, I like to think I was getting savvy at that after my 12 years at Legacy. And in the last 2 months, I did do really well. And it was a very similar situation where they're offering critical coverage. And then, as you know, Tony, they were offering that override as a check airman. So, man, I was able to, do some creative scheduling and then get some students and make some, pretty good money there at the end.
Yeah. So, know your contract. That's the lesson here. Know the contract. Know what you can and can't do. Know what they can and can't do, because if you don't know, they will bend it to their will. When it's convenient for them.
Like you alluded to in the beginning of the segment there, you kind of learn it as you go. I mean, you want to know as much about it right out of training as you can. But, like, let's face it, for the 6 weeks that you're starting off at the airline there, you are just trying to figure out how to fly this airplane and memorize all the memory items and things like that. So the contract is the furthest thing from your, furthest thing from your mind at that point in time. And then, like you said, as soon as you get that check right over with, all of a sudden, boom, now you're being held to the contract. And you're just trying to figure out, what you can, what you can't do, and how to do things. How do you sign in? How do you just sign in for a trip? It's crazy. But you kind of learn it along the way, and we've all been there. We've all violated the contract, not intentionally, but come to find out later, that wasn't the way our union wants us to do things,
Yeah.
But it sounded good at the time, sounded like the most sensible thing, but more often than not, the sensible thing is not what the contractual thing is.
Yeah.
So,
and even with FAA regulations, for a while, there was a campaign that ALPA put together, and you could be driving around the airports around the country, and you would see a billboard with a real senior gray-haired captain in it, and it was a big ALPA, which is Airline Pilots Association, billboard. It's saying just because it's legal doesn't mean it's safe.
It's safe.
And
really, wow.
There's a lot of truth to that, and that was at a time of growth. That was I think about 10 years
working
ago.
on the old Railway Labor Act laws of the 1940s or 1950s or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of changes that need to be made, and thank God they made them. But even now, it's still, some of these schedules that we're flying are brutal. Yeah. I mean,
I haven't done anything but a 10-hour layover in weeks now.
It's crazy. In 10 hours, you would used to be like, hey, that's plenty of time to do stuff. But man, you get there and you're just so tired from, just all the nonsense going on around you, that when you get there, you need all 10 hours just to wind down, get some sleep, and then, get yourself going the next day. And sometimes that's not even enough. I mean, you're just, pushing the limits there, so.
Yeah. And
it's crazy.
Like I said, just because it's legal doesn't mean it's safe. If you know that you're not safe to operate on all your cylinders, that's what the fatigue call is for. And so you got to fill out a report, but that's what it's there for. That's why we cannot be penalized by calling in fatigued, through protection from the FAA. So, Pete, you're getting ready to go through the qualified upgrade course. And I believe, Rob, you went through the qualified upgrade as well, right?
Yes, I did.
And so did I.
Yep.
So, Pete, you're in good hands if you have any questions. I mean, granted, it was a long time ago, but and I'm sure.
Yeah, and mine was in the 121 check ride world, so it was completely different from the AQP stuff, but it's for, you still do the same things, right? You still do the one cuts and single engine landing go arounds, and it's all the same.
You do the same
kind
thing,
of evacuation.
You're in the left seat instead of the right seat. That's it.
Do they still put you through a captain DNR class, duties and responsibility? That's what I remember they used to call it. DNR.
Yeah.
DNR.
Yeah. I guess they say that's the most boring part of the whole process,
Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah. And that's not an FAA required class. That's a company imposed class. Basically, okay, you're now in charge. You're putting your signature in the logbook. So what can you expect in terms of responsibilities as the PIC?
Yeah. Yeah. Legacy has the same kind of class over here too.
Yeah.
They dress it up a little bit with a dinner, I think, and
they feed you before they kick you.
Yeah, exactly.
So are you getting ready for this qualified upgrade class? Is it a lot of pressure for you, or do you think piece of cake?
Well, I've talked to a lot of guys, and they said it's really fun. It's really enjoyable. I do like going back to training. I always learn something. I like to prepare for it, and that's where I'm at now, is the beginning of the preparation phase. So I go at the end of the month here. It's the 7th. So really now is I just started the other day with my ground training, CBTs, computer-based training, and I've got a couple friends going through the qualified upgrade as well. So now it's just getting a hold of them and seeing what their thought process is and what they're doing to prepare. And I mean, I've gone through what is it? Recurrent training multiple times here. We've all taken multiple check rides. We've done this, so we should know how to do it. So I'm not too nervous about it, but I am at the same time because I know how much work it takes. But I know is if I put the work in, it'll go just fine. And what I keep hearing is qualified upgrade is a breeze. You're going to go there, have a good time. You already know the airplane.
Exactly.
You know the flow. I mean, you know everything. It's just now you're doing it from the left seat, so it's just recurrent from the left seat. And I'm a sponge. I'm going to go in with an open mind, and I'm there to learn, so I'm going to just do my job, and hopefully it all turns out well. But as I stated, I'm in the beginning process of starting to prepare for everything. And I've got plenty of time. I've got some trips that I'll be on that I have time to study on for the overnights or on the overnights. And I do a lot of, I have a lot of things recorded on my iPhone of me studying previously for recurrent. Mm-hmm. And so I drive about an hour and 40 minutes to work. And I just listen to limitations. I listen to systems questions, and I just listen to this over and over and over and over
again. It's awesome.
For the course of a month. And then I could just blurt it out when the time comes,
So it sounds to me like your principles of learning is auditory.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Well, think about it. If you hear it, you should be able to say it, right? If you hear it enough, if that's all you're listening to, then it just overtakes your mind, So yeah, definitely.
Yourself.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. And so I guess I figured that out back during my first type rating in the King Air 350. I recorded, and I still have all that stuff now. So if I ever were to go fly that again, I could relearn, or I could just listen to that, and so I've got everything saved on my phone for recurrent or the 145, and I just listen to that, and I just go over the new if they updated anything in the manuals, and should be good.
Yeah.
So I'm not overly worried about it. Kind of excited. I think I'm ready to kind of set the tone in the cockpit and sit in the left seat and have a good time. And really looking forward to it.
Good. Well, we wish you luck, and please keep us updated on your progress as well.
Thanks. I'll need it.
Now, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the challenges that you went through throughout your entire journey in aviation. I know at the beginning, everybody has the hurdles that they have to get over and get through. What were some of your biggest challenges?
Some of my biggest challenges. Well, I think I touched on it just a little bit before, but I used to have a really bad stutter problem. I was one of those kids in school. When we were reading chapters out loud, I would count the number of paragraphs and find my paragraph that I had to read, and I would reread and reread and reread. And then when it finally came to my turn to read, I would and I couldn't get it out. I would stutter really bad. So for me, communication was a really big challenge. Talking on the radio to air traffic control and just spitting out my call sign, who I'm talking to, that was a really big challenge for me. But I overcame it. It was just practice. Practice makes perfect. And also having that job at True Green, having to go door to door, meet new people, and to learn how to communicate effectively definitely helped. So that was, I guess, communication was a big one. And everyone's going to say, I think I would agree. Everybody would agree here. Finance. Having the money to be able to finance this profession. This hobby, whatever you want to call it. And I was fortunate enough to have a wife who had a great career as a nurse and was able to support me for a long time, to be able to get through this.
Yes. And was there ever a point in your training or your general aviation time that you had an in-flight emergency that really shook you a little bit?
Definitely. Yeah, I have one. I've I've had a few, I should say. We'll start off just with the first one here, and it was at Capitol Drive Airport in a Cherokee 140. I was a private pilot. I had 75 hours at the time, and this was in that time frame. I had the private pilot. I was building that time for the instrument, and so I was going to do a solo cross country flight at night from Capitol Drive to Madison and back. And I remember before I took this flight, the whole purpose of my flight was to have clear and effective communication, perfect navigation. I was using VORs. I was going into a Class Charlie airport, so just dealing with ATC. Everything was supposed to go perfectly. that was the plan for this flight. It was solo at night. It was a summer night. And so I'm in the airplane. I get to the end of the runway. It's at night, untowered airport. I do my run-ups, and everything goes well. Run-up only takes 30 seconds or so in a little Cherokee. And I advance throttle and I go down the runway. I believe it's 60 knots. You rotate. I pulled back. I climbed maybe 50 feet, and the engine cut out. And my heart sank, or my stomach sank, whatever. I was scared. Well, what do you do? I did what I was trained. I reduced throttle. I pitched down. I'm probably 75 feet above the runway now, 3/4 of the way down the runway. You just took off, right? Pitched down, landing light illuminated the trees at the end of the runway. And you've always heard, if you don't like what you see, when that landing light illuminates, shut it off, right? But I didn't shut it off. Right? So I reduced throttle. I pitched down, and I was going to crash. I was going to crash into the trees at the end of the runway. I didn't have the room to land. If I were just to push it down, I'd gain airspeed. I wouldn't be able to stop. If anything, I would porpoise, and I was going to crash. And so instinctively, I added throttle because it was still windmilling. The prop was still moving. I added throttle. I pitched down. I saw the end of the runway. Saw the trees. I added throttle. It came back to life. As soon as it came back to life, I pitched up, cleared the trees, and I did a flow. I did an emergency flow. Mixture rich, fuel pumps on, switch gas tanks. There's not much else you can do in a very simple single like that. That's about it. Carb heat, I think, was one of them. But I did this flow, and I cleared the trees, and 30 seconds later, it died again. So now I cleared the trees. There's a road to my left, Capitol Drive, is a 2-lane, kind of like a small highway. And I said, okay, I'm going to put it down on the highway. So I pulled the throttle. I already did my flow. Nothing else changed. And I was getting set up to land on the highway. I was making a left turn. So I pulled throttle. I was getting set up, and I didn't even think about it, but it worked before. So I added throttle again after, I don't know, maybe 5 seconds or so. It came back to life. So I climbed up. I said, okay, great. I got, maybe 10, 15 seconds of full throttle. I'm going to turn around and land the way that I just took off. I started making my turn, and nice and shallow because I was low, right? And I know you're supposed to land straight ahead, but I had power. I was climbing. I was in a climbing turn back towards the runway. And I turn, and it's just a black hole. The lights shut off at the airport. So now I have to bring up the lights, and 5 seconds later the engine dies again. And so now I bring up the lights as I'm in the best glide. Now after I bring up the lights, I realize I'm already halfway. I'm right in the middle of the airport, maybe 150 feet high. There's no way I can make a landing from here. But you know what? This is working for me. I can climb for maybe 10 seconds, and then I pull the throttle for 5 seconds, and and so I did this. I did this. I went up and down, up and down. I finally made it to a left downwind and just pulled the throttle. Did executed a power off 180 and landed. So it died on me a few more times throughout this experience or throughout this time. and I landed and I brought it back. And the thing would still idle on the ground. It would idle, and it would have, if I added gas, it would go for a little bit. So I'm pretty shook up. I make it back to the ramp. I park the airplane. I pull the mixture. The airplane shuts off. Master's still on, and I hear splashing on the ground. There's a little window on your left with a Cherokee, and I hear splashing on the ground. And I immediately knew what it was. I hopped out of the airplane. The last place the fuel goes in a Cherokee 140 is at the bottom of the engine. There's a strainer down there where you strain on your pre-flight. This particular design, it had a T, and if you pushed in and turned, it would lock open. Oh. And that's how you drain some fuel to check if there's any contaminants. And so things started to make sense to me as I was putting this all together. We'll go all the way back to my pre-flight inspection for that night. I'm walking around the pre-flight. It's night. I have a headlamp on. I'm trying to do everything perfectly, right? But I missed a couple steps. One of the first steps was to make sure that the fuel was in left or right, not in the off position. It's either left, right, or off. It was in the off position. I didn't verify it was in the off position. It should have been in left or right. So during my pre-flight, when I walked around, the fuel selector was in the off position. So when I went to drain fuel from the lowest point or the last place the fuel goes before the engine, it got stuck in the on position. I only got a few driblets. I said, okay, it looks good. And I continued. After, when trying to start the airplane, I realized it wouldn't start. I'm cranking. I was like, well, what's going on? I look, oh, sure enough, fuel. And so that was a checklist error. So there's a lot of things I learned here during this time, or this flight. And so I learned, okay, so I put it into left, let's say, and the airplane started up, no problem. Taxi down the runway. But what was happening, I had the electric fuel pump on, or idle. I had enough fuel at idle because it was still draining this whole time. I'm spitting fuel out of the bottom of the engine. Mm-hmm. When I started up the airplane, I brought up the lights because I couldn't see. I brought up the lights as soon as I started the airplane at the airport. I never turned them off or return them back on before takeoff, so that's why they shut off, because I think it's a 10-15 minute timer, Yeah. So I learned a lot. Yeah. And so anyways, what was happening was I was just the gas was just leaking from the bottom of the engine there out of that fuel drain. And the carb would burn the fuel that was in it, and then it would die. When I would pull the throttle to idle, the carburetor would refill back up with the engine-driven fuel pump and the electric fuel pump. It would fill back up, and then I would burn it off when I added full power.
Yeah.
So that was at 75 hours, and that shook me up a little bit for a few days. I was kind of scared, but then I came back, I think that weekend. I said, okay, I got to get over this. And I went flying again. It was no problem. But that was my first real emergency in GA. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, that's
so yeah, a few things that I learned.
Fantastic.
I'm just going to. Yeah. So that's a few things that I learned there were, just to, I guess, checklist usage, proper checklist usage, and the whole purpose of this flight was everything was supposed to go perfectly, and I think I was doing things right, but probably just rushing through this checklist. There's a checklist for a reason. Do verify, or trust and verify, right? When you read something or when you're doing a flow, I've caught myself, I've got comfortable in the jet that I'm flying in now. So I'll do something. I'll realize I'll say it, but I actually didn't look at it. And I'm like, oh, you know what? I got to make sure this is here, that's there, So just proper checklist usage was one big thing that I learned that night. Resetting the lights before you take off, in case you need to return, so they don't shut off on you. And I guess I had really good training because it was just instinctively what I did. Instead of trying to pull up with the and just stalling out, pushing down and doing that flow, fuel pumps mixture, whatever that fuel selector, training kicked in, and I was able to land and bring the airplane back in one piece.
Yeah, that's an amazing, amazing story. And I think a lot of it to do with your mechanical ability and understanding the system had a lot to do with it. You figured it out. You used critical thinking and your knowledge to figure out, well, this works. Let's keep going. I mean, the fact that you were able to make it work and come back. Now, the fuel, as you explained it, was draining, and therefore, when the demand exceeded its ability, it would go to idle. It would have fuel starvation. And that checklist usage and ensuring that you're not going too fast when you're reading a checklist, and you said trust but verify. We see this every single day. How many times have you walked up to an airplane, the crew's gone, but the beacon light is still on? And you're thinking, oh, why is the beacon light on? That's why. 99.9% of the time, it's because you've gone through your parking checklist or secure checklist, whatever your airline calls it, and you read it, and the captain, as a first officer, you're reading it, and the captain says the response. And you're reading it while you're doing other things and packing up your bag and your EFB and your headset and stuff. It's like, slow down. Take the checklist out. Read it. Don't read it like you're a Micro Machines guy from that commercial from the 80s. It's like, park brake on. You make your eyes, as the person reading the checklist, make your eyes go to, in the case of the Airbus, the triple indicator. Oh, is there pressure? Is it, okay. And the next thing, beacon off. Have your eyes go up. Take a look. Your captain might look at you like, what are you, stupid or something? What's taking so long? But there's a reason. Now, obviously, it doesn't go that slow. It kind of goes faster, but don't just arbitrarily read it. And I find myself very guilty of this. We all do, especially late at night after the third leg of the day or fourth leg of the day, and you're tired and it's dark and you just you're done. The airplane is connected to the jet bridge. The engines are shut down, and all you got to do is read a checklist, and you know it by heart, although you're not supposed to do it by heart. So, park brake, all this stuff, and you're going through it. Slow down. Verify. It may seem like something insignificant when you're reading a parking checklist. The brake is set, the engines are shut off. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You leave a beacon light on, big deal. But it's through that process of, I do this consistently with everything, and every time I read a checklist, and I'm never going to go faster than what is reasonable, then when you're really time crunched and you've got an engine failure at 450 feet off the deck at night and you don't like what you see, you're still going to go back and go, oh, memory item. It's a checklist that you've memorized. What is it? Step by step. And in your situation, it probably saved your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it would have, if it would have been an accident, it would have been down to pilot error. That's how they would have classified it, because they would have found that valve or, that little thing open there. And it would have been, pilot error. It wasn't the airplane's fault. It was the pilot's fault. That was my pre-flight, so just going too quickly, being too excited, maybe being in a time crunch, led to that scenario, and slowing down and verifying everything's done appropriately would have prevented it.
Absolutely.
And you'll probably never make that mistake again.
You're 100% correct. Trust me. I told everybody about this, who was
exactly. We all do. Yeah. We all make those mistakes, and we share it with everybody we know that's an aviator, because, they will probably learn from your mistakes. What do they say? A good pilot learns from his mistakes, and a great pilot learns from other people's mistakes. Well, that's how we all become good and great pilots.
Yeah, don't keep it a secret. If you learn something, you did something, everybody, we're human. We all do bonehead things. We all make errors. But hey, I made this error. You tell your coworkers and your friends about it. Yeah. Like, they'll learn not to make that error. They go, oh crap, listen to what happened to Tony. Did you hear what happened to Tony?
Yeah. and I think for me, if I make an error like that, or, any kind of an error, and sharing it with somebody else is almost a way of me, like, not creating a bad habit. You know what I mean? Because if it happened, it's probably some kind of bad habit that I have developed, somewhere along the way. And, if I talk it out and say, hey, I'm never going to do that again, and then you share that with your buddy. And then, if you happen to come close to doing it again, they're like, hey, I thought you said you were going to do that again. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. Thank God we talked about it, Yeah. So that's for me. That's how it works.
Yep. Absolutely.
What have you had at Sandpiper? Anything that happened at Sandpiper that?
Yeah, we had a rapid decompression actually.
Really?
At Flight Level 280. Yeah, coming into Miami.
No kidding.
Yeah, it was. I've realized that things, when something goes wrong, things don't have to happen quickly. You don't have to do. There's not a whole lot in an airplane or in a jet that you have to do quickly. Besides putting your mask on in a rapid decompression.
Exactly.
Or explosive, or in an explosive decompression, and but anyways, so I had a rapid decompression coming into Miami. We were doing a longer flight. I think it was somewhere in Ohio back to Miami. One of our longer flights, and it was a great time. We were having a great time. The captain and I were getting along very well, and everything was set up. And so, we were flying from Cleveland, I believe, back to Miami. We just started the arrival into around Norman Beach, and at 280, the captain realized
the Highly arrival.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, one of those highly 7, 6, whatever it is now.
Yeah.
And captain, he started freaking out. He's not freaking out, but he started pointing towards the ICAS, and we see that the cabin pressure is rising, and he immediately jumps into action, and it's rising rapidly, and we're losing, pressurization. And the first thing he said, he goes, I've seen this in training. I've seen this in training. He goes, grabs his mask, puts it on, and there we go. We started our memory items, oxygen mask on, crew
on 100%.
On 100%, communication established, rapid descent as required, and so anyways, we initiated a rapid descent and or emergency descent as required. That's what it's called, emergency descent, and declared an emergency. It wasn't explosive; it was just rapid, and he was pretty excited, and which got me excited. The first thing we do is we adjust our seats. We're sitting forward, because we're sitting back, relaxed, cruising, and
you're in cruise mode.
You're in cruise mode. So we adjust our seats. We're on our way down, and I remember, he's breathing really hard, and we established crew communication. We could hear each other, and I could hear him just breathing, really heavy. And I remember looking over at him in our, we're in our descent, we're bouncing along, getting down, speed brakes are out and gears down and all that. And we're bouncing along. He's breathing really heavy. He's hand flying it, and I just looked over at him, just kind of tapped his shoulder. I said, hey, I go, you all right, man? And he looks over at me. He's like, yeah. I go, all right. And we fist pounded. And then we continued. And I just had to slow him down to slow myself down, But we descended, got to we were shooting for 10. We blew through 10. I said, okay, we're going to level at 8. And we leveled at 8. And he was telling me to drop the mask. So in the Embraer 140, 145, the masks will deploy, I think, at 14 or 15,000 feet.
Yeah.
14. Yeah. And the cabin rate never got that high, but he was saying masks, through our oxygen masks. And I was like, what would you like me to do? And he says, drop the masks, and I thought about it for a second, and I realized that, I don't know if we're going to have an explosive decompression, or if it's going to go or if it's going to
continue to climb.
Continue to climb. I don't know what's going to happen. He's asking for it. it will deploy automatically. But I said, okay. I mean, this has all happened in a matter of 2 seconds.
Sure.
Thought about it. He asked for it. Thought about it, and then boom, just dropped the masks. So
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was that. We landed, and that was it. We thanked everybody, on board. Yeah, we got down. Everything was good. Declared emergency and landed. And then they discovered it was leaking somewhere around the PCA, wherever they hook up the preconditioned air.
Yeah.
So.
You brought something to light that we talk about in training all the time. When you were in the middle of the emergency and you were in your emergency descent, and you said you brought your seat up and you're bouncing along, and you can hear your captain over there just breathing, and you tapped him on the shoulder and you looked at him and you were like, "Are you okay?" And he looked at you. He went, "Yeah." And then you fist bump. That's something that is awesome. We talk about that all the time. Sometimes you get so caught up in the moment, and you get like what do they call it? Tunnel focus. Is that what it's called?
Tunnel vision.
Tunnel vision, right? And you're just focused on doing the right thing perfectly, and you forget about everything else. And it happens to everybody,
right?
And you just tapping them on the shoulder kind of brings them back to, hey, we're good. Your scan is out here now, where everybody's in the green, we call it, and we're outside of the yellow. And it didn't sound like you guys ever got in the red, which is awesome.
No.
Which is a term that we use in training. Red being you're completely clueless to what's going on. Yellow being like you're kind of tunnel vision, or you're kind of little outside of your comfort zone. And then green meaning, hey, you're with it, you're dialed in, we're doing everything properly. That's a great way to bring somebody back into the green.
Yeah,
that was cool, man. That was a great story.
That's a wonderful story. And
yeah.
We train for these things, these events in theory, and you're in a simulator that's what, $10 million CAE simulator. That's just like being in the real airplane, and the fact that your captain's like, I remember this from training. It's just like from training. It's the same thing, and it kind of brings you into.
He goes, I've seen this before.
Yeah. So I mean, great job. Fantastic. And for you to have the wherewithal to kind of bring him back into the green by just taking a moment, and because you got time. I mean, you had time. So you brought him back, and that also helped you out a lot as it brought you back.
Definitely. Yeah, because I usually don't get too excited when things happen. There's a reaction for every action, right, that happens up there, and we should be prepared for those. And what I wasn't prepared for was my captain being a lot more nervous than I would expect, and so that made me nervous, because here I am. He's supposed to have, he's the almighty, and
we're human.
And to see him being a little more excited than I was expecting, got me excited, and so that's where I needed to just level us both off.
That's a human factor. I mean, the training is being able to handle that part of it. The human factor part of it, and bring not only him down back to a reasonable level of focus, but yourself too. You know what I mean? Because like you said, you got amped up at him. That's human factors. I mean, you feel probably, I wouldn't say you felt compassionate for him, but when he was excited, you were like, holy shit, if he's excited, am I supposed to be excited too?
Yeah. What is he seeing that I'm not getting?
Yeah, exactly.
What? Oh, wonderful.
A+, man.
Wonderful
nice
story.
job.
Yes. Now, you've talked about some successful reactions to some in-flight emergencies. And let's dial it out of the emergency topic, and let's just talk about, sometimes you're out on the flight line and you're dealing with a conflicting personality on the flight deck. How have you handled that in the past? I mean, because you seem like a pretty level-headed person in general. Have you ever had difficulty with that?
I feel like I could get along with just about anybody, and I think I can. and 99, let's say maybe 98% of the guys out there are the same, but every now and then, you run into a guy where you butt ahead with. And I haven't had too many experiences here at Sandpiper. Maybe I could just think of two. One that happened when I was new, and one that happened maybe about a month or two ago, and how to deal with them. Well, the first one, we were landing, I was landing at an unfamiliar airport, and I don't know if this was more of conflicting personality. I guess it kind of was, because I was still new and I was still in the mindset of being a captain. I was a captain at my last job. Prior to this, I was an instructor. So, I was the guy everybody was looking for answers to, and I was doing the training. So for me to sit in the right seat was a change of roles. And I guess I took that. I could have, I kind of stepped on this captain's toes, because I wasn't necessarily running the show, I remember, on this flight, but maybe instead of him asking for number 2 to be started, I would prompt it, hey, let's start number 2, or maybe, my big thing is I like to give progressive tax instructions to everybody, because I don't know where I'm going. So I just talk myself through it. And I think he looked at that as maybe he thought that I didn't think he knew where he was going. So I was, I felt that he thought I was stepping on his toes, and I probably was. I probably should have let him run the show instead of prompting, okay, let's start 2. Okay, we're making a right turn here, blah, blah, blah. And he is a senior captain, and he was this young guy, he doesn't know my experience, my background, and he's probably dealt with a lot of these newer guys, So anyways, we were just landing, and it was an upsloping runway. I couldn't see the end of the runway. So I said, okay, I'm coming on the brakes with you. And because I knew the exit was on the end, but I didn't know where the end of the runway was, because upsloping, I couldn't see it, and he was still going quite fast. And I know he wanted to make that exit to get to the FBO quickly, but I just couldn't see it. So I just said, I'm hopping on the brakes with you, And he immediately, as we're in the process of landing, comes back and says, oh yeah, he goes, you've been doing this crap all week, and I'm like, oh boy, and so I came back, immediately and I said, oh yeah, well, I can't remember what I said. I fired something, off right away. And here we are landing a jet with people in the back, and we're arguing, then I realized that I said this, I was like, holy cow, I just got to stop. We got to land this jet. So we landed, we stopped, no problem. But we had a conflict, and it was quiet till we got to the gate, and he was heated, I was heated. And we deplaned, and I just had to leave the cockpit. I had to leave the cockpit and had to take a break, use the restroom, get a drink of water, and prepare, how am I going to deal with this situation now? This guy's mad at me. I don't know what I did wrong. I feel like I stepped on his toes. I had to get on the brakes. So I didn't take control of the aircraft, but I just wanted to slow down a little bit quicker. So I thought about it, and I went back and I said, Captain, if there's anything that I did that was wrong, I apologize, but I feel that we were going a little too fast. I couldn't see the end of the runway, and I felt that we needed to slow down some more. So I stepped on the brakes, and he said, no, it's good. It's good. It's fine. I go, no, it's not fine, because I want to be able to express this and tell you what, I want to talk through this, because we were at an outstation. We still had to do another turn. We had the rest of the trip to fly together. And I didn't want it to be an issue, and I said, if I did something wrong, please tell me, if there's a different way I could have handled this, how could I have handled it, differently? And, his kind of response was, well, he actually apologized too for kind of jumping down my throat at that point. He said, you're right. That's fine. I understand. He said he should have said that. And I told, we just kind of apologized to each other and just worked through it. And the rest of the trip was fine. We had no issues. We got along just fine. No problem. But I kind of realized too, after him saying, you've been doing this crap all week, well, yeah, maybe I should have him tell me when to start number 2. I shouldn't prompt him to start the APU, or I should let him be the captain. And that was me trying to fit my role as a first officer, coming from being a captain at my last job. So just learning when to be a chameleon, when to be the first officer, sit and let the captain run the show. And so, and then how I dealt with that was, just going to him, directly and letting him know. I mean, I felt comfortable enough to do that and to talk with him, and it was a positive outcome.
Yeah. And that's exactly the kind of stories that we love to hear, because we all have that point of humility as an aviator, whether that's with an instructor and a student pilot, with a first officer and a captain, and even with a captain and a first officer. I mean, I can't tell you how many stories I've heard, how many times I've been a participant in a scenario very much like the one you are. Even recently, I don't remember the exacts of it, but very recently I was running through some kind of checklist or briefing, or I was like, all right, I'm ready to brief you on the descent if you're ready. And the captain's like, well, I'm not as quick as you are, so you're going to have to slow down. Give me a minute. And I thought, oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. I'm sorry. Take your time.
Yeah.
And so I immediately recognized that maybe with this particular pilot that I am flying with, this captain who outranks me here, I need to kind of slow down and interject okay, are you ready for a descent? When you're ready, let me know. And for some people, you have to have that little extra patient and tone that will keep a positive atmosphere going. And
yeah, so
I'm a lot like you, Pete. I get it. I've been there. I've kind of been like, what's this guy doing? And so it's kind of hard. And you are a chameleon. We've been talking about this for years.
Yeah.
That, you have to kind of feed off of who you're flying with. And sometimes you're both like on point and it's just like bup. And it's like the most awesome trip because you're both, on point and up to each other's speed and you mesh well. And those are the trips that are the most memorable because like, yeah, we flew this airplane. Yeah.
Yeah. And those listening to the podcast, we've got a big pilot group. And the incredible part of all this is that, we all go through training and we all are taught to operate the aircraft the same way. So you can take any of the 15,000 people in our pilot group, put them together, and for the most part, it's going to be operated exactly the same way every time. I mean, obviously there's going to be some variances, but as far as operationally, we're going to do it the same way. And very rarely do you come across a situation like Pete had or something, or Tony you had. I mean, it happens, but it's very rare. You know what I mean? But it happens. It does, and usually it's a minor thing. Like in your case, Tony. It's minor. Hey, I wasn't quite ready for it. I'm a little slow. I don't even know how to turn on my iPad. Hold on, let me figure this out before we get to that part of it.
I had a captain. I was like, we were talking about he's like, oh, you do a podcast? I'm like, yeah, I'll pull out your phone. I have one of those wristbands that have a near field RFID thing. And so you just hold your wristband to the phone and boom, here comes all the websites and all the social media stuff for the podcast. Yeah. It's a kind of cool little gadget. So instead of handing out business cards left and right, I can just have them scan it. And most, aviators are pretty hip on the technology.
Savvy,
Captain pulls out a phone. He goes, you mean with this? And he flips it open. He shows me the monochrome. I'm like, oh, OTG, buddy. All right, off the grid. I like it. And he's like, well, maybe can I scan it with my tablet? I'm like, your EFB? Yeah, sure. Let me show you how that works. Can you turn the Bluetooth on? Oh, let me see how you do that. Hold on a second.
Oh, jeez. Oh, that's funny as hell.
Yeah. Well, Pete, as we're kind of wrapping up the show here, I just again want to say thank you. A couple more things. Goals for the future. What are you looking forward to here?
Wow, goals for the future. Yeah, I guess my goal here at Sandpiper is to upgrade and spend a year as a captain. And right now, the industry is on an upswing again. We're trying to get out of this coronavirus thing here, and people are starting to hire. And my goal is to spend a year as a captain here, get some quality time, and I guess reassess the situation after a year. Whether it's to stay at Sandpiper and eventually flow to Legacy, or explore other options. But really, this is a career, that I want to stay in, and I don't want to make a whole lot more moves. I'd like to make just one more move and be done with it. So I guess a year from now, ask me the same question, we'll see, and I should have a better, definite answer for you.
Oh, absolutely. Mark it in your calendar, buddy. Now, we wanted to kind of wrap it up with your reaction to some of the chaos that is happening in the industry with weather phenomena that are creating cancellations and diversions and overbooked flights and not enough staffing and not enough contracted out services, and everything's just kind of, all you got to do is flip on your social media news feed and you're just riddled with one dramatic news story after the other. The 5M love this stuff. This is all fodder for those that are like, oh, look what's happening. And, and most of the stuff is unsubstantiated. Like, there was no strike. There was a rumor I heard, oh yeah, the pilots over at this airline over here are striking. I'm like, that's illegal. No. They're not striking. I mean, they can have a slowdown or something, but that's federal law that if you're an airline pilot at a 121, you can't strike. That's that National Railway Act that Rob was mentioning earlier. So do you think, have you seen this trend over at Sandpiper? And do you think that it's going to continue much longer?
I haven't seen cancellations on our end here at Sandpiper. Schedules are definitely improving. I guess for us, we're flying more. We're having a lot less, sitting around in hotels. We're doing 4 or 5 legs a day. And not as many lost days. So cancellations, I don't see it on our end. I do see it more on the, majors, they're canceling flights, and also low-cost carriers. But as far as Sandpiper, we're flying, we're doing as many flights as we can, possibly. But I'm not seeing the craziness, I guess, as you mentioned, in the news here, at Sandpiper. I haven't personally experienced any of that.
Now, you've been based in Chicago now for your entirety over at Sandpiper. Has the flying out of Chicago improved at all over the past few months?
Definitely. I think that, as I just stated, we had quite a bit of lost days. That's where, for the listeners, right, where we are just sitting in a hotel all day long. Throughout COVID, we had a lot of this where we'd be gone for 4 days, and one of those days would just be spent in a hotel. So the flying definitely has improved. On the 145 side, on the 175, which is a large aircraft there for Chicago, the flying has actually decreased. So there's a lot of lines in Dallas and in Miami, but on the 145 side in Chicago, the 175 side, Chicago, the flying has decreased. So everyone's a little worried about that. But 145, it's kind of been, it's been steady, really steady, increasing, I think.
Recently we've been talking about some of the elements that have created chaos here in the industry. We're not going to get into detail over what's been going on, from first officers making religious, homophobic PAs that were just really uncomfortable to listen to in a captive audience, to, Spirit Airlines canceling more than 50% of their flights over the last 4 or 5 days, and their CEO coming back with going, well, it's weather and we're trying really hard, to American Airlines having weather issues in Dallas, which I actually was a part of. Maybe on the next show, we'll kind of get into the details of how that fiasco came about. But one item that really caught my eye, that just, I was in stitches was an incident that happened on Frontier. Now, extremely bad behavior is not uncommon from the low-cost carriers, and unfortunately, one passenger had to be restrained by being duct taped to their seat. Now, it was packaging tape, not duct tape or duct tape, however you say it. But this passenger, and I'll put a link in the show notes from a link from variety.com, was taped after groping one of the flight attendants, yelling at them, telling them how my parents are rich and could buy this airplane. And it was terrible, but not unusual. But where the true response came was from the reaction that the flight attendant in question, who was put on administrative leave almost immediately from Frontier, was posting a video on YouTube, and it was picked up by one of the morning TV shows.
May I add real quick? It was paid administrative leave.
Yes. Pending investigation. And it was fantastic. Let's take a listen.
Of a belligerent passenger causing sheer chaos in the air. And it got so bad that flight attendants had to duct tape the man to his seat. Ever since masks were required on airplanes, flight attendants say that their work has become downright dangerous.
Now understand something. I'm a flight attendant. That means I attend the flights. Sometimes our job has us attending to crazy people. If you push us too far, you're gonna have to attend this ass whooping. You see, because on this particular flight, I'm sitting in the jump seat and I'm just looking at him act a damn fool. He's spitting and cussing and going crazy. I say, that's enough. I got up and I walked over there. And by the way, this man smelled like a pack of Marlboro cigarettes, 4 shots of Everclear alcohol, and regret. So I know something's about to go down. At this point, he touching all over my coworker's breast. And where he f***ed up at is when he touched my titties, because I don't play that. So what I did is I took out the duct tape. I said, he got scared, started stuttering, say, hold up, wait a minute, something ain't right. I said, yeah, we about to mummify your ass now, boy. So we wrapped him up. Better than any Christmas present you ever see. He won't be coming on no more Frontier flights at all.
I don't know about that. Oh boy.
Their reaction.
Awesome.
Oh my God.
Holy cow. That was the first time I've seen that.
Their reaction to that. Incredible. Oh, classic. I'm a mummify your ass.
Better than any Christmas present.
Now, though the news information was actually legitimate, the part of that video that depicted the interview for the flight attendant has actually been proven to be fake. He's a comedian, and you can find him on YouTube on The Real Spark. It's a channel on YouTube. What he does is he takes real news articles and then interjects himself as being interviewed. So although the news feed was real, the interview portion was absolutely a fake. However, thank you. That was very entertaining.
Yeah, definitely.
That was good.
Well, as we wrap up Flight 86 of the Squawk Ident Podcast, I just want to say thank you to Pete. You've shared some amazing stories. I've learned quite a bit about your journey, and man, you've really inspired me with how you've handled yourself throughout multiple emergency scenarios throughout your career. Hopefully, someone listening who may find themselves in a similar situation will remember what you went through, and it could save their life potentially.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's actually been really fun, and I hope to, speak with you again and maybe, hop on the show in the future sometime.
Absolutely.
No, hey, Pete, it has been a pleasure talking to you and listening to your story, and good luck on that upgrade. It's well worth the, all the hard work you're going to have to put into it. And hopefully we'll see you over at Legacy one day, and we'll be able to share some more stories and go out and get one of those, go for the run and go out for some Cuban food.
Yeah, definitely. That's the plan, is
Cool.
just to continue. So, yeah, nice meeting you, and look forward to chatting again sometime.
Absolutely.
Right on, man.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming along on this journey with us by listening to our podcast. As Flight 86 is starting its final descent into the virtual airport, we here at Squawk Ident would like to thank you for flying. Please help us out. Make sure to subscribe and follow the Squawk Ident Podcast. And if you would just spend a moment and take the time to write a review on either Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to the show, it really does help us out on the standings. We appreciate your support and especially your feedback. You can send us audio feedback directly through our email, which you can find on our website, or you can send us on the Contact Us tab some audio feedback as well there, or just send us a note. You can find our website at www.aviatortony.com. That's Alpha Victor, the number 8, Romeo Tango Oscar November Yankee.com. And you can find audio archives, photos from the flight line, our Squawk Ident pilot shop, and our guest book photo tab as well. You can also contribute to the show financially right there from the homepage with either a one-time or recurrent donation. Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram users can find us under the Squawk Ident Podcast. One big final thank you to Rob D. and Pete Tenderenda, and thank you to all of you for taking the time to listen to these grateful aviators. Keep the dirty side down out there, be safe, and take care of each other. Bye, y'all.
See ya.
You're on guard. You're on guard.
On guard.
On guard.
Yeah. Where'd he go? There. Where is he?
What? You're on guard.
You're on guard. There he is.
Who let the guard dogs out? Whoop.